What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Welcome to the Lead Counsel podcast. I'm here with my marketing person, Juliet, my good friend and many times co-host. We have a special guest today. We're here with Allon Avgi, another very, very good friend of mine, and he's just a special guy and near and dear to my heart. I've been friends with him and his family for probably close to 25 years at this point. And I'm excited. He's going to be spitting some knowledge today about how he got to where he's at. And I'm going to start it out like this. $100 million assets under management at 27 years old.
I'm an old man, Tom.
Welcome, Allon. I'm so excited to have you here, my brother.
I love you, man. You're the best. What a beautiful introduction.
I know, right?
I love you too. So you and I met how many years ago at this point?
You met me. I was a little boy.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to appreciate who Tom Tona was back then. But
And you too, guy.
But you saved my mom because she got in that brutal car accident a long time ago.
Yep.
And then my dad, I think, did a move for you. And we just became friends thereafter. And then one day I got into business and I'm like, I have a problem. And my parents said, call Tom Tona.
You were just getting started, basically. And in 6 years, you built it from how many millions?
When we sat down, I had 2 properties, probably worth $700,000.
Right.
And now I'm at about $100 million.
And so let's just be clear for people listening. What's the business that you're in?
Real estate investments. So it's like a real estate private equity firm. We buy properties, reposition them, and typically lease them out. So it's lease up plays. So we'll buy an apartment complex that's run down. We'll renovate the whole thing, soup to nuts. We'll refinance, get as much of the money out as possible to pay back our investors, or we'll keep some money in to be safe, and then we'll cash flow and hold it on our books. So we don't look to flip.
Right. And I mean, think about what you just said. You went from under $1 million to almost $100 million under management in 6 years. I mean, that is just a staggering kind of turnaround at that point, like when you think about it. So on top of the fact that just as a friend, I love you to death, and your family, we go way back. I am so impressed with what you've built. And so I'd like to kind of jump into that because I know there are people that listen to this podcast that are in the real estate investing space. And what you've done is really kind of special, right? So let's start out with this. Have you ever worked for anybody else your whole life?
I took an internship when I was in college. I launched a beverage startup and I actually lost my money doing that. I lost all my money at the time. And I worked with the owner of Arizona Iced Tea, Don Voltaggio.
Yep.
And that guy's brilliant in himself. It wasn't a paid job or anything. It was just so I could learn the business. And I learned a lot about business fundamentals from him. But working for someone, no, I've never really worked for someone other than my clients, I guess.
Right.
My investors.
Sure.
I feel like I work for every single one of them.
Sure. And you do. So interesting to me, right? You went through, did you get your MBA? I don't know.
No.
Okay. So you went through college, you had a business degree.
Yeah.
Finance?
International business.
International business. And then straight out of school, you just kind of went entrepreneurial, right?
Well, in school, even before school, I had a drop shipping business. I was selling furniture online. My parents had the furniture store. I did it online. I would bring in the inventory to their warehouse, sometimes other warehouses across the country, repackage everything and ship it out. I got into real estate when I lost my money in the drink company. I said, all right, I don't want to work for anybody. I don't want to get a job. So I will launch something with a hard asset that maybe I won't lose my money in. Maybe I will. Hopefully I won't. And I said, what can I do? And I told my parents, you guys have a couple houses. I think I should get into the house business, buying homes, renovating and renting them. I was obviously very green at the time. I knew nothing about the real estate investment space. And my dad and mom were like, we have your back. You know, my dad's like, I'll renovate whatever you need. You got to come up with the money because we don't have millions or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I can handle the renovations. So I did. And my mom's like, I'll deal with the tenants. It's like, awesome. My mom ended up working at the furniture store my parents had. My dad came to join me after I grew past like 15 houses. And that was the start of the real estate company.
Which is awesome. And it sounds simple, right? Like you kind of made it. It's really simple, but it's not, right? So you had to go raise money.
It's so funny because I always get the same things. The one thing you said in the beginning where you're like, it's staggering. You know, you went from 0 to 100 million. And to me, it's not staggering, you know? And the other is, you make it sound so simple, but it's not. And both are so true, right? It's like, to me, it's not staggering because I'm like, as an entrepreneur, you have this feeling of I'm never enough. You must feel it in your law practice.
It never goes away. It never goes away. I got to do more. I got to do more.
You're not big enough yet.
Right.
You don't have enough people. You don't have the right infrastructure yet.
Right.
And then from the other point, you hear like, it's not that simple. But you're like, it's not, you know? I feel like it's all I know. So to me, I break it down simply.
But your process is simple because you're doing it 24/7, 365. But it's actually really complex if you start to think about it, right? So, you know, I'm doing EOS. And one of the biggest goals with EOS is examining everything and simplifying it.
I'm the type of guy that I do things.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I figure it out.
As you go.
Yeah. And Tom's
like
always
all
there.
Good entrepreneurs,
yeah.
Right? You move first and then you check with the lawyers. Let's say you want something moving faster, but it's not moving as fast as you want. You know, and I'm like, Allon, you got to slow down. You know, it takes 10 years to build a samurai sword. And like what this project is, it will get there, but we got to take our time to get there, right? We got to do it the right way. So there's a lot of complexity that sounds simple when you say it.
Yeah.
And yeah, what you have accomplished is staggering because at under 30 to have 100 million in assets, and you and I had an off the record conversation one time about net worth, and I won't disclose your net worth, but you know, in that discussion, how you got to your personal net worth, that's impressive. And the fact that you know that that's the important thing, right? It's not about the car you drive. It's not about the watches you wear. You're in here in jeans and a t-shirt, you know, Getting to where you're at under 30, all you've accomplished. What would you say the number one needle mover is in your business life?
Some context to my top needle mover, because I had a moment to think about it now. And it was the first thing that came to mind, and it's what I'm going to talk about. I just would like to build on it a little bit. The investment business is unlike most other businesses. If you think about other companies, any other business, it's bringing in a client, selling a product or a service, correct?
Right.
In the investment business, you have to allocate money. So it's a totally different business because if somebody comes to you right now with a personal injury case, you're taking the case, right?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
For the most part, you're taking the case.
Investigate it, yep.
Yeah, and from the investment business, you have to execute on allocating a large amount of capital on something with a large inherent risk. No matter which way you cut it up, there's a large inherent risk. So I think I know my number one needle mover is execution. And I think it's going to be hard for a lot of people to digest unless they've allocated money before. So for anybody listening to the podcast that has, then you know what it feels like to put up your money or to take other people's money and put it up. But if you haven't, you're just not going to be able to understand. In theory, you can, but until you do it, you won't fully grasp the concept of allocating $7 million to something or more.
Right.
So execution is by far the biggest needle mover, going from houses to larger scale projects. Whereas I see much of my former competition can't even compete with me. And I'm passing them by leaps and bounds because they don't have the execution and the confidence that I have to go after these larger deals. They're stuck with the houses.
Right.
So the biggest players you'll see in our market are doing 10 to 20 houses in a month, let's say. Whereas I'll do one project in a month and that's covering their 10 to 20 houses.
Right. Because you're also focused on growth, on bigger projects, on the next evolution of Avgi. That's the name of your company. And I should have mentioned that in the beginning. Interesting, though. That's a really meaningful answer. And I'll tell you why. I've defined the role of a leader as twofold. My main job at this point is to, one, cast and create the vision for the business, and two, how I deploy resources. So I 100% get what you're saying, right?
Deploying resources is a big one.
It's execution, right? It is literally how do you deploy time and money, not only for you, for the whole organization, right? And so, yeah, I get it. And one of the things I think that has always set me apart is my comfort level with risk and decision making, right?
Well, you and I even had a discussion about risk and when you wanted to jump into real estate. Do you remember?
No, refresh my memory.
When you first sent me the deal that your friend's son was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You said, Allon, what do you think of the deal? And I broke down the deal for you and I said, Tom, it's a good deal, but set that aside for a second. Do you trust the operator?
Right.
You said, of course.
Right.
I know his father. He's a good kid. I see a great future for him. I said, well, that's where your decision-making lies. Because the deal has 100 different things that could go wrong with it any day.
Best deal that I could have done too, by the way.
Yeah, it went fantastic.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the deal could say 20% IRR, it could say 50% IRR. Do you trust your operator? If you do, then you allocate the money, right? Because the deal might work, it might not. No matter what anybody pencils down on paper, things change.
Right.
I've had a house burn down to the ground.
I know.
I've had a wall collapse at one of my properties in the middle of a refinance. So things happen that we have no control over. If you trust the person running the operation, then that's typically what should decide whether you allocate or not.
Again, another impactful statement. A lot of what you're saying is very impactful. Like, think about somebody coming out of school now. It's a different landscape for real estate investment right now. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing?
Well, somebody coming out of school now, here's a little bit of a journey I've been through. I came out of school, real estate investing was not that hard compared to what it is today. Banks were lending. COVID didn't hit yet. Laws were in the favor of the landlord in New York.
That's a long time ago.
That was in 2017.
I know.
Then 2019 came around.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, I'm still fresh in the business. I've got 10 houses at the time? I'm just growing. I'm tight with money. Things are changing. I'm taking hard money to get deals done. All the laws change. Every real estate operator in New York is in trouble, right? Because now it's taking us a year and a half to get a tenant out rather than 2 months, 2 years to get a tenant out. You can't collect rent from the tenant if you're evicting them. Laws that blow your mind.
And it got worse after 2020 when COVID hit.
Even worse when COVID hit.
Yeah.
But then rates tanked. And any moron could do well with real estate.
Right.
Because when rates are 3%.
Free money.
Yeah.
Free money, man.
Yeah.
When rates are 3% and banks are throwing money at you, it's almost the easiest thing to do is just buy something. Right? Because you have no real long-term risk with the debt. Now it's changing. The landscape has changed. There are deals again. This is unique. This was pre-2019. We were seeing a lot of deals. Now I'm seeing a lot of deals. There's a lot of distress, but banks are tightening up big time. So the lending world has gone backwards. The deal flow has gone backwards. It's just like it used to be, which is fantastic for solid operators with a lot of cash. But it poses a challenge for people that think they could just get into this space and have an easy ride, because it's no longer easy.
You said something that was really interesting. You hit on the topic of trust, and that's what I'm starting to unpack that a little bit. The role of trust is key, right? In who you choose as an operator, who you choose even as an investor.
Big time.
Right? Because there's different types of investors. There's investors that when things are good and everybody's making money, they're your best friend. And then the first time things are a little tight or you got a capital call, now you got a little bit of an issue. You and I have talked about that in the past, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, you've been through a lot in the last 6 years that you do have this wealth of experience, which is really fascinating to me because it's like a condensed education, right? What do you think is next for Avgi in terms of scale of project? Your goal was to close 100 million by the end of last year, if I remember correctly, if I'm paying attention to your social media.
You're right. Didn't get there.
I know. But, you're in May and you're almost there. You're at like 94, 95 million, right? You said?
Yeah. It's been a lot of putting out issues since the whole market changed. And I think that focusing on that rather than straight growth is what's going to keep us sustainable. I've studied Japanese companies a lot, and they build out their companies for thousands of years. And that's how I'd like my company to look. And you hit on a good point earlier. You said you've been through this crazy journey over the last 6 years, this education, so to say. And it's so true. Like, wow, I wish there was a camera here so they could see my facial expressions.
Right.
It's like, wow, this journey has opened my mind. And I think I'm very lucky to have the mind that I was born with, because I really break down what I look at, what I analyze, and understand the opportunity. I've always been like that since I've been 5 years old. So rather than being stuck on one asset class and not even growing much and hitting a cap like many competitors have done, I understand the different moving factors and I look at large scale. So I think also starting from zero has been a huge benefit for me, because rather than having something handed to me and not having that deep desire, it's the opposite. I have this deep desire and figuring it out along the way. So what's next is we're going extremely opportunistic, because times like these are where billionaires are made. And that's been really the end goal, to hit billions under management and then really turn into a private equity firm where every project is like you're an entrepreneur in your new journey, but it all falls under a similar umbrella. I think that's where I'd like to be over the course of my life, which is just like Amazon and Blackstone and BlackRock and all those big boys. They have portfolio companies.
Right.
And now I'll give you an example, which I haven't released or talked about yet to anybody, but we're looking into the hotel space extremely actively.
Nice.
It's a space that's getting devastated. Banks are tightening up big time. We are hard value add creators, my company. That's how I've built it. Construction doesn't scare us. Repositioning doesn't scare us. High interest environments don't scare us. That's how I started in the business. That's how I know how to navigate. So the interest rates going from 3 to 10% doesn't really scare me. I've been in the 10% environment. I mean, hell, I started at 14%.
On a credit card, if I remember correctly, right?
You started with hard loans, right?
Yeah, hard loans. And then the credit card's at 24%. So I've been there. I've already been through that ride. So this doesn't scare me. But what I've understood, what I've analyzed, is now I have the opportunity to go into much larger scale, much more profit heavy projects, like a hotel.
Right.
A distressed hotel that has 100% upside in total project cost, not equity.
Right.
Talking like 500% on the equity.
So you took your real estate investment company from 0 to almost 100 million in 6-7 years. So how do you keep things from like cracking at the seams? Like, how do you handle the management of such a large portfolio, and you plan to scale even further? So how do you plan to prevent future cracks? I mean, you said half
Breakage
this year.
you're talking about, right? Yeah.
Breakage and like the foundations of your investment firm and things like that. And you said like the beginning of this year has just been putting out fires. So like, how do you even handle that or manage all of that?
So managing those cracks is what has slowed down growth big time. And that's where we've allocated our resources rather than allocating them all to growth. If the market stayed the same and the interest rate stayed the same and everything was where it was a year ago, then I wouldn't have that issue. I would still be growing at the same speed. I'd probably take down 150 million this year. But because of the way the market turned, pivoting to risk mitigation, to asset mitigation rather than growth is how I'm managing all those cracks. So those cracks don't become valleys.
Yeah.
They stay cracks.
Right.
And it's a large portfolio in layman's terms, in most eyes. But in the real estate world, I actually have a very small portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I have a small team, which we can pivot on the drop of a dime. When you get too big and you have divisions and you're like BlackRock, or Blackstone, for example, where they have these huge portfolio companies, they can't snap their fingers and make a change. It needs to go through the corporate structure. When you're at 100 million, you could change on the drop of a dime. You have a small team.
Yeah.
Things start to change when you get to 300 million, because now everything might not touch my desk.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get to 500 million, that's where the process will take a little bit longer. Now imagine these guys at 200 billion. They have the foresight to see something coming, but in order to make the changes for what's coming, it's like it goes through the workflow.
Yeah.
It's a corporation. You know what's cool? Something that I've been talking a lot about that kind of relates to what we're discussing is I broke down my business into 3 categories, right? After a lot of thinking and talking to serious people and hearing ideas, the 3 categories obviously have a trickle after you get into them. But 1 is deal sourcing.
Okay.
2 is operations. And operations has property management, asset management, construction. And 3 is money. So money is private family offices, banks, institutions who are backing you.
Finance.
Yeah, or billions in the bank because you sold your company or something.
Right.
So that's really the 3 pillars of real estate investing. If you don't compete in any one of those, you are doing this as a hobby. My competition, where I do best, is deal sourcing. I think I have some of the best deal sourcing in the country, if you ask me. My systems, my team, my infrastructure, the amount of deal flow we get doesn't compare to anybody else that I know. Nobody.
Other people have told me that, by the way. They were actually copying your model, which is good. You know, like, look, you share. You talk to I put you in touch with people that are just starting out, that are 10 years behind you or 5 years behind you. And you're generous again with your time. It's not like you keep it a secret. You're like, look, my strength is deal sourcing and here's how I'm set up. And that led this guy to put together a deal sourcing team. And
I love that.
And now he's got a lot of deals coming in.
So then do you plan on delegating the operations and the money?
Well, this is where I need to allocate my time differently.
This is where you probably will need to end up delegating as you grow.
And EOS, I need EOS. But if you think about money, who competes in money? Who? What in real estate?
What do you mean?
I'm in the money space, right? I compete in deal sourcing. Operations, I've got down, but I'm not a master in it. I can't say we're the best of the best. Deal sourcing, I can say that. But when you talk about money, I'll tell you who. Blackstone.
Right, the banks, the hedge
KKR.
funds. Yep.
Their competitive advantage is
the
money.
size. Yeah, the size.
They don't have the deal sourcing. They don't have the operations. That's why they buy and sell a lot.
Right.
They build portfolio companies and move them because their management, their operations isn't their strong point. They're not like Fairfield.
Oh, okay.
You know, Fairfield is the master of operations.
Yep.
Hilton Hotels, master of operations. Those guys are operators.
Yeah.
Blackstone, KKR.
Money. Yep.
Myself is deal sourcing right now. So I've got one pillar down. Now I've got to get the other pillar. It's actually very simple if you break it down into the core competency.
But it ain't simple, man.
But it's not simple. And it takes a lot of your time. So where's your time best allocated? And then allocating money is who really controls everything. So just like Blackstone, they can be the biggest player in the space because they hold the money.
Right.
I hold the deal sourcing so I can grow fast, but I can't get up to their level because I don't control the money.
Let's talk about one of the biggest obstacles you have. You're 27?
Yeah.
Okay. That in itself, think about how difficult that must be when you have to go into a room and pitch them on a hotel deal of what size? You put a number on it.
$30 million.
$30 million. You're rolling in there at 27. You don't have wrinkles or gray hair like I do. And if you show up jeans and t-shirt, right? Like, it's not that you're not very competent at what you do. You have a track record, a really established track record. But people make micro decisions in an instant.
So true.
And you're 27. So like, talk about how you overcome those challenges at 27, walking into a room to pitch a $30 million raise.
Do you think people don't take you seriously because of your age ever?
They used to, but not anymore.
Not anymore. You've proven yourself at this point.
Not anymore, because you know what? It's an oldie but a goodie is money talks. You know, and it's...
You got a track record of people
and
that will vouch for you and open up the doors even for you.
Yep. Like I can make a phone call and get $1 million check. So that's down payments and due diligence. That's not a problem anymore. And money talks. You know, like if I'm sitting in a room for a $30 million project, it means I typically have it under contract.
Right.
And getting to there means I had to lay out about $400,000 at risk money. The money's gone.
Right.
So you're walking into that room already. I'm not 20 anymore, you know, with $0 and just trying to figure it out. Now I'm 27 with tens of millions behind me and still trying to figure it out. But the tens of millions is what gives me that credibility and all the projects I've done. So I've walked into this room. This actually just happened with this $30 million hotel project. And I have $400,000 gone. It's in the project. I'm not getting it back.
Right.
So how can you not take me seriously?
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
I'm sitting in
100%.
front of these people and I'm telling them 400, it's out the door. I'm in, I'm committed.
Right.
You know, so let's continue with the convo.
Yeah.
They brought up my age. That was the first thing they did.
Yeah.
Like, you're 27.
How did you respond?
That's how I responded. I'm like 27 or 37. I have 400 grand at risk right now. I'm seeing this through to the end.
And 100 million under assets, under management, right? So
I said that and they kind of like shrugged that off. And I'm like, it's kind of easy to shrug that off. I just don't know how.
I think one of the
You know?
one of the qualifying factors for me is if you say I have 100 million under asset management with X amount of my own millions deployed in that, right? That to me then changes the equation big time. It's not just a 400 number now. It's whatever it is. Let's say it's 10 million in your own capital. Now it changes the analysis big time because I'm like, oh, he's a player, man. He's got real skin in the game. There's not many 27-year-olds are going to walk in and say, I've got this much deployed in 100 million under management.
Another big piece is who I can call now. Like when I could pick up the phone and call Tom, or I could call I could call some of my big players that are behind me, my big investors.
You have an extensive network.
Yeah, that I've built over years, and go-giver mentality, giving
Trust.
first. Yeah, and trust. When I could call them and then comes through the door, just look those guys up and they have companies bringing in hundreds of millions a year, everybody takes you serious.
Yeah.
This is who's behind you.
And then they could vouch for you as well. So it just gives your name even more credibility.
So talk to somebody who's starting out where you were 6 years ago. How did you find these players? Like, I remember you telling me stories like you would just go into the city for these real estate networking events and all of these different brain trusts that you were part of. Give people some concrete action steps, stuff they could take away immediately if they say, I want to do what Allon's doing. Where do I start? Is it a business plan? Is it a networking plan? Is it all of it?
Everything comes together by doing things. Like
Execution.
that's it. We're on this podcast right now, and you open my eyes to a different management technique. Things just come together when you surround yourself with the right people and you do the right things. So, and I met them at an auction house. It just so happened that they had too much money and they didn't know what to do with it. And they were like, you know what? Why don't we buy houses for fun? So they went to the auction in their extremely busy schedule, and they have a crazy company, by the way. You haven't seen it yet, but
We buy products from them.
yeah, you guys buy
I
products.
buy
from them.
promotional products from those guys.
I've showed you his factory, right?
Yeah, I was there. I was there. They're very impressive guys. They're very down to earth. They love you to death.
So those guys, and they built one 2 times the size across the street. So those guys, it just so happened that they stood behind me in line and we became friends. And then I showed them what I was doing. It's not like I looked for them and I was searching. It's like when you don't look and you just show people and you constantly move forward, you move that needle, then things come together.
They found you.
Correct.
They found you. You weren't chasing money. You were there for yourself to look at projects.
I was at a podcast once and somebody heard the podcast and he called me, said, hey, I have $700,000 that I need to put into real estate.
Wow.
Tax purposes, and I want long-term wealth. I said, perfect. I'm a portfolio builder. I'm not here to do quick flips.
Right.
If you want to turn your money quickly, and I turn away investors.
Because they want flips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want fast
It's a
money.
different business model too.
I'm not a fast money guy.
Right.
I'm a patient. Once I execute, then the patience begin.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And you said you're trying to build a sustainable company that's going to last thousands of years. So it's like long term is the goal.
Exactly. So you got to be comfortable with who you are and what you're doing. So people that say, I want to do what Allon is doing. Do you even know what I do? You know what I mean?
Right. All right. I just want to say thank you for coming on, man. It's always a pleasure. I love you to death. And thank you, Allon, so much. If anybody wants to find you, how do they find your Instagram? What's your handle?
At Allon Avgi. You'll probably put it in the description.
It'll pop right up.
Awesome.
Yeah,
so find me on Instagram, DM me. I'm very responsive. And I love you guys. Thank you for having me on.
You've been awesome,
course.
man. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I look forward to it. We'll probably
This
have
was
you on
great.
again.
Hell
Yes.
yeah.
All right, my man. Thanks.